Welcome to episode 161 of the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I'm Ashley Scott Myers, screenwriter and blogger over at sellingyourscreenplay.com. Today I'm interviewing screenwriter Jack Sekowski. He was recently hired to write a Hallmark movie, which was an assignment from a producer he met using the SYS email and Fax Blast service. So we talk about that project, and we also talk about his early days of his career, how he got his first agent, how he sold his first script, and how he got his first writing assignments. So stay tuned for that. If you find this episode valuable, please help me out by giving me a review in iTunes or leaving a comment on YouTube or retweeting the podcast on Twitter or liking it on Facebook. These social media shares really do help spread word about the podcast, so they're very much appreciated. Couple of quick notes. Any websites or links that I mention in the podcast can be found on my blog in the show notes. I also publish a transcript with every episode in case you'd rather read the show or look at something later on. You can find all the podcast show notes at www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/podcast, and then just look for episode number 161. Just want to mention a free webinar that I'm doing on Wednesday, March 1st, 2017 at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's called How to Effectively Market Your Screenplay and Sell It. I'm going to go through all the various online channels that are available to screenwriters and give you my unfiltered opinion of them. I get questions all the time about the Blacklist, Inktip, and various contests. So in this free webinar, I'm going to talk about my experience using these various services. Again, this webinar is completely free. Don't worry if you can't make it to the live event. I will be recording the event, so if you sign up, you'll get a link to the recorded event after it happens, even if you don't attend the live event. To sign up, just go to www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/free webinar, and the word free webinar is all lowercase and all one word, so it's sellingyourscreenplay.com/free webinar. I, of course, will link to this in the show notes too, so you can just click, you can go to the blog and then just click over to it. Also, if you're already on my email list, if you've already getting emails from me, you don't need to register for this webinar. I will send everybody on that list information on how they can attend the webinar as well. Once again, if this sounds like something you'd be interested in listening to, just go to www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/free webinar. Quick few words about what I'm working on. So once again, the main thing I'm working on is post-production on my crime action thriller feature film, The Pinch. I had a day of reshoots yesterday, which was mainly just establishing shots and some inserts. Everything went well. We got all the shots that we needed to get. I'm going to work with the editor this week to get those shots laid into the film, and then hopefully I can lock picture in the next week or two. I've also started work on a horror thriller spec script. Once I lock picture on The Pinch, I should be able to devote some of my creative energy to something new. So this is kind of what I'm looking to be doing. I'm still in the early process with this project, but the plan with this script is something similar to The Pinch. I'm going to write it in such a way that it could be shot on a super low budget. One of the people I met through The Pinch is an actor and a producer. He wants to do something together, so assuming I can write a halfway decent script, this will quite likely be my next project as a writer and producer. I'm just at the outlining stages of the script. For me, that's actually the most fun part, so I'm excited to kind of dig into this, but obviously I've still got a lot more work to get this thing in shape. I'm thinking it's probably going to take the Pinch about once I lock picture, I'm thinking it's probably going to take about 3 months to finish everything up. All the different sound, special effects, color correction, all that stuff will probably take a few months. In the meantime, as I said, a lot of that work is not work that I personally will be doing. I will be hiring, a composer to do the music and an effects guy and a color correction and all of these different positions. They're not things that I have the technical skills to do, so I'll be relying on other people to do that. So I will have some sort of free time during that thing as these other people go to work on The Pinch, and I'm thinking just creatively, I'll have some energy and I can put that into this new spec script. So that's the plan, and as I said, it'll probably take another 3 months to finish up The Pinch, and the goal is to have the screenplay done, pretty much done once The Pinch is finished, and then we can really start to ramp up production on this if that's the direction I decide to go with it. So that's the plan. As I said, lock picture on The Pinch, start writing this spec script, and then hopefully in 3 or 4 months, The Pinch will be done, and this spec script will also be done about the same time. Anyway, that's what I'm working on. So now let's get into the main segment of the podcast. Today I'm interviewing screenwriter Jack Sekowski. Here is the interview. Welcome, Jack, to the Selling Your Screenplay podcast. I really appreciate you coming on the show with me.
Thanks a lot, Ashley. It's a pleasure.
So to start out, maybe you can take us back to your early childhood, kind of how you got interested in film, and just bring us up through those first couple steps to actually turning this into a career.
Right. It's one of those classical type situations. I was always interested in stories. I was a only child. I read a lot, and so I started writing short stories when I was little. Well, as soon as I learned how to write, and then I became interested in photography. So I started taking pictures, and then I decided to mix the two together. So I started making short Super 8 movies, which, were fun. And it's that creative outlet. You have ideas and you put words to them and create images and you tell little stories, which was great. And ultimately I ended up going to Ohio State University to study photography and cinema, which was really good. After Ohio State, I came out to California, where the mecca of the movie world, and got into the American Film Institute, where I studied screenwriting, which was also a great experience. Just like wonderful people, very talented people. People went on to much bigger things than I have so far. Like, for instance, Janusz Kaminski, who won a few Oscars shooting Spielberg movies, who was one of my classmates. I mean, it's fascinating to see who went far, who didn't, who was going far, and now they're in jail. There's there's stories like that, but it's been a few years. Yeah. So my first big break. Let me rephrase. It actually wasn't a big break, but it was a pat on the back. At the time, they had a screenplay competition called FOCUS, which was an acronym for Films of College and University Students. And it was like a national thing, of course, and it was pretty cool. They brought people to Los Angeles who were the finalists, and they housed them up in a fancy hotel downtown Los Angeles. And every day we did fun things, going to a fancy restaurant, meeting executives, meeting producers. So for a few days like that, I ended up winning second place in the final, like a gala celebration at the Directors Guild, where it was like packed with people, like everybody and their brother were invited. So this was like a big thing at the time. So I won second place with my first screenplay called Shooting Star, and nothing happens.
And you were still at Ohio State. This was before.
No, this is after I came to California, after I graduated from AFI.
Okay.
Yeah, so, I win this award, and then nothing happens, even though I'm assured by the sponsor, like, oh, yeah, you'll have your screenplay option within weeks. And it's like, okay, great. It's like, this was easy. You hear all the stories of people struggling for years. Here, I graduate from AFI, and I win a screenwriting contest, and suddenly, everything's wonderful. And, it wasn't. So what do? Well, you write another screenplay and you get an agent. And the first agent hunt was not terribly challenging, but it was in the primitive era before emails and a lot of information. I mean, the internet did not exist at the time. So what I did was I thought it was clever at the time, was find out what writers wrote in my genre. Of course, getting their names from the credits of movies. And then I called the Writers Guild and found out who represented them, using the logic that if this agent represents this writer, then most likely he possibly is open to that specific genre. And this was an erotic sci-fi thriller, which won the award, of course. And excuse me. And so I send letters out to all these agents, and basically saying like, "Hi, I just graduated from the American Film Institute, and I just finished this screenplay that's hot off the presses, and this is what it's about. Looking for representation. We'd love to send it to you." And lo and behold, people did respond. I mean, I guess AFI has some clout, and people said they would see it, but ultimately nobody offered representation, though I did have a few conversations with people which were encouraging.
And how many letters do you think you sent out?
For agents, I would say 20 to 30.
Okay. And you got how many meetings out of that, or phone conversations?
20, 30, and I think most of them requested a screenplay. And out of that, I would say a handful I had conversations with. So it wasn't a very good experience ultimately. I mean, it didn't lead to an agent, but it did lead to an agent who sort of said, hey, this isn't right for me. However, next thing you have, let me know. So I did. And next thing I wrote with my girlfriend at the time. We started collaborating on screenplays. Her name is Maria. And so we wrote a screenplay, sent it to, actually, who's a big agent. His name was Stu Robinson. He has since passed away. And he liked it, and he hip-pocketed us for a year. Again, he did not manage to sell the screenplay. We did get some meetings out of it, more encouragement, but still nothing. So we switch agents, write more screenplays.
Just talk about that relationship. So number one, maybe you can just define hip pocket for people who don't know, and then also talk about how that relationship kind of went, to the end, and how you decided to move on,
right,
or vice versa. Him pushing.
Yeah, it was very simple. We had an agreement where we gave him permission to shop the screenplay around for a year. And once it ended, it ended. He didn't, obviously if it would have sold or got set up somewhere, option, whatever, or it led to a writing assignment of some kind, he would have signed us as a regular client. But since that wasn't the case, we just had like a shopping agreement with him. So it was very straightforward. This was in the days of paper screenplays, so we brought a box of 24, huge box filled with 24 screenplays, and he started sending them out. And he forwarded us emails or letters from people who were responsive to the screenplay, just to encourage us. Occasionally we had a few meetings, which ultimately did not lead to anything. Many of these meetings in Hollywood are what are referred to as general meetings, where you simply get to know, meet and greet, as they call it, or water bottle tour, where you meet people and you get a bottle of water and you tell your life story, and they ask you what else you're working on, and they can, on the calendar, when they report to their boss what they did that week, they can say, well, we met some very talented writers who are working some wonderful things that we hope to get in the future. I'm developing a relationship with them, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So a lot of that. But so ultimately the relationship ended, and there was no hard feelings, and we moved on to another agent. And
so how did you get that next agent?
The next agent, we got him because through a friend. The guy was an assistant at ICM to a huge agent at the time, and somehow through somebody I met him, we had lunch, and that agent then, that assistant then became an agent. Ironically, at the same company our first agent was at. So it was almost like in-house. He was there, and then we moved to him. But it was almost like starting from fresh, because we sent him the material and he liked it, and then started representing us.
Okay.
And so it was that. Again, more screenplays, but as you go, on these water bottle tours and get to know people in your general meetings, so you sort of develop relationships. So when you develop this relationship, they like you, they trust you, they see that you're a good writer. They're not always eager to take a chance on you just because you've never done anything. You have no credits. So it's a big risk for them. And, they want somebody else to take the big risk to see if you deliver. However, in the relationship development process, if you're in a situation where you need to reference to get another agent, many times they're more than happy to do so. So I end up
You're
getting
talking
another.
About these executives. If you need
Right.
an agent, you can say to the executive, "Hey, I'm looking for an agent. Do you know anybody?" And sometimes these executives will pass you to another agent.
Exactly.
Okay. And that's how you got the second agent, or you're getting ready?
That's like the third. I mean, there were a few along the way.
Okay.
We finally reached a point where we were represented by these two agents at this boutique agency, and one decided to become a production executive, and the other one went to Willie Morris. And she did not take us with her because we have not made her any money, so it just can't really make the argument for us with the Willie Morris bigwigs. So like, hey, I have these talented writers, but they haven't sold anything yet. They haven't made us any money. And ultimately, as you know, it's a lot of it is about the money. And so we end up in a situation where we finally like, this is different. Like many times we left the agent. This time the agent was leaving us. So this time I thought of a clever way, slightly more clever than my previous approach, which was put together a list of 5 to 10 literary agents who really have reputations for selling spec material. And this is like, we're talking about the 90s, which was a really good spec time. And so I put together this list, and then we went to, we met with all the executives over the years we met with, that we've met before. And with them, we told them we're finishing up a new screenplay. We're going to be searching for new representation. And by the way, here's a list of people who were referred to us as good representatives. What do you think of them? And of course, by and large, they said, "Oh yeah, these are great agents." And then I asked them, "Well, it'll be all right to use your name, when we contact them?" "Oh yeah, absolutely." "And do you know any other agents who are not on the list you think might be a good match for us?" And they usually sometimes, drop a name or two. "Can I use your name?" "Absolutely." So by the time we met with these, 10 to 20 executives, I had a list of, I think, about 25 different agents. And so when I wrote to them, again, this is before email, paper letters. Yeah. When I wrote to them, I basically saying, "We're looking for new representation. This is what this screenplay is about. And so 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 thought you'd be a great agent for us." And lo and behold, people responded. People responded like very quickly. So I sent out a batch. The first batch was like on a Wednesday. They received the letter on a Thursday. Number of a call on a Thursday. I sent a screenplay out that Thursday. So they received on Friday. Come Monday morning, I'm getting a call from a fairly reputable mid-level literary agency, from the head literary guy. So I like the screenplay. Let's meet. Let's talk. It's like, wow, again, this is so easy. You just write a good letter, write a good pitch, have a good log line, and they want you. So we go to Century City, Maria and myself, and we meet with this head of literary department of this agency. We meet a mid-level agent and a new agent, a fresh young agent. And we start talking to them, and it becomes a very, very weird meeting because of one of my bizarre Hollywood stories. It becomes a weird meeting because they're talking to us with this tone and attitude as if they gave us $1 million to write a screenplay, and we totally screwed it up. And we're thinking why are we here? And I asked them at one point, "So what do you like about this screenplay?" And the head guy says, "Oh, I love the first act. It's a beautiful setup, just fantastic. But, the second act really doesn't work very well. It just needs a lot more work." But then the mid-level agent pipes in and says, "Oh, no, I love the second act. The second act was fabulous. I'm not crazy about the first act. The setup just doesn't work for me." Mm-hmm. And before us, they start arguing about the screenplay, which is like, wow, this is so bizarre. And at one point, they turn to the third guy, whose name was Jim, and say, "Hey, Jim, so you're awfully quiet. What did you think about this screenplay?" And Jim says, "Well, I think it's a really good idea, and they did a really good job at executing it, and I think it'll probably sell." And I just look at him like, "You traitor," and they start arguing with each other again. It was really, really bizarre. Obviously, we did not go with them. And so out of these 24 agents we submitted a screenplay to, 17 end up saying, "No, we don't like it. We don't get it. I have clients who are writing similar kind of stuff, and I haven't been able to make any traction with them. So sorry." 6 of them, I couldn't get an answer out of them, one way or another. Just kept calling them, even wrote them letters. "Hey, just checking to see if you had a chance to read the screenplay I sent you 3 months ago." Mm-hmm. And 2 said yes. 2, said, "Yeah, this is great. I think I can do something with it." So
2, in addition to this one crazy meeting that you had.
Yeah. No, yeah, exactly. So we had one crazy meeting, which ultimately became a no. So this was part of the 17 who said no. Okay. 6 we couldn't get an answer out of. And then the 2 out of the 25 that we sent a screenplay to, they said they liked it. They want to represent us. Oh, great. So we met with them, and this is funny because this is a process that essentially took about 4 months, and we met with them, and we liked them both. One, but they were so different. One was a very sweet, reputable, I would call her Earth Mother type, because it felt like she was like a former hippie. Her name is Karen Borman. She has since passed away. I'm starting to sound like all my agents have passed away. No, but she was like, she felt real. She felt human. She didn't feel very Hollywoodish. The other guy was very Hollywoodish, but he was involved in selling some big time screenplays. And so, who shall we go with? The shark or the Earth Mother? Shark or the Earth Mother? Mm-hmm. And since we had sharks in the past, I thought, let's try the Earth Mother this time. It's sort of like flipping a coin, ultimately. We went with the Earth Mother. She set up at Universal a week later. And just like, how does this happen? Why did it happen? What did she see? What did she say to these producers who also got excited about the screenplay? And they got different territories throughout town. This producer gets this studio, that producer gets another studio. Mm-hmm. Depends where their deals are at. And they loved the screenplay, but these 17 agents didn't. I mean, I like to assume they all read the screenplay, but you never know. Maybe the assistant read it. Yeah, and actually, the funny part is one of the assistants who did read the screenplay, who tried to convince her boss to take us on, became our agent like 2 years later. So it became this really bizarre small world.
Yeah, yeah.
So
up to this point where you get the Earth Mother agent, how many scripts had you guys written from the time you wrote that erotic sci-fi that you won the contest with? How many scripts do you think you had written?
I would say like half a dozen, maybe 6 to 8.
Okay.
I can't say it was a ton of material, but so we're talking over the course of about 7 years.
Okay.
So maybe like 1 a year, 1.5 a year, somewhere around there.
Okay. So then she gets this thing set up at Universal, and what does that actually look like?
It's a classic option sale agreement. So basically they give you money to have the rights to the screenplay for a year, and then they give you money to rewrite the screenplay, and then if they should make it, they give you a bigger chunk of cash. I mean, it's like the classic thing you always hear about, like low 6 figures against mid 6 figures sort of thing. And the deal was actually with Larry Gordon. He was actually the producer on the screenplay. And Larry Gordon, if for those who haven't heard of him, is a big-time producer. He used to run 20th Century Fox, and I believe he was a producer on everything from like Die Hard to Waterworld. I mean, he was really big in the 80s and 90s. And in action movies, which this isn't. This is a comedy. So it was like really weird, like, Larry wants to do this movie? Yeah. It's like, all right, who are we to argue with Larry Gordon? Uh-huh. And so we developed further. We worked with one of his executives closely to do the rewrites, and his name was Michael Levy. And Michael was amazing. I mean, he was amazing. He was a genius. I mean, I'll give you an example. There was a scene in the screenplay that we couldn't crack. We rewrote it a dozen times and just like tried to make it work. We just couldn't figure out how to do it. I mean, it wasn't horrible. It wasn't perfect. And we reached a point where you just like, you give up. I don't know what else to do. Let's hope nobody notices it and hope they like the rest of it enough. And so Michael read the screenplay, of course, and he said, like, it's great, except the scene here, I said something wrong with it. I'm not sure what it is. And he starts talking about it, and we're listening, and suddenly he gets called away because Larry is on location. He wants to talk to him. And while he's away out of the office, we talk, and we suddenly solved the problem that was like driving us crazy when we were writing the screenplay. It's like, how do you do this? I mean, what did he say exactly? We don't know. I mean, it's just one of those things that the things he said sparked our imagination in such a way that helped us to solve the problem of that scene. Okay. So it was, you hear the stories about, development hell. And our first development experience was pretty amazing.
Okay, it was good. You liked all the notes. Were there ever any notes that came to you that you didn't like or didn't agree with?
The big part about being a writer is solving problems. I mean, there might have been some things there. I believe, this was a while back. I'm sure there were some things. And our argument was, we always could present an argument. I mean, so it becomes like you present the reason. The reason this is the way it is because of this. And if we cut that out or change it, this will affect this, that, another thing. And they're like, oh, you're right. Okay, never mind. So, sometimes we like, yeah, okay, I know you want it. Let us figure out a way to do it. We do it. We make it work, and we make them happy. ultimately, you have to remember, they're the ones who are signing the checks. You want to make them happy.
So
Otherwise, you get
what
replaced.
ended up happening to this script? Did it end up getting produced?
Unfortunately, no. Larry's deal ended with Universal, and there was also, I believe, a change in the administration, and so it was one of those things where it goes on a turnaround, because this is a movie with a producer who's no longer with us, and the studios clean shop ever so often when they change administrations. So it never got made, but it was really funny. Like for years after that, like out of the blue, I would get like a phone call or email from like total strangers who track me down, and they say like, before Billy, which was the name of the screenplay, of course. Before Billy, I love this screenplay. Like, has anyone seen it? I want to do something with it. It's like, yeah, a few people have seen it, but it just for years, like at least a couple of times a year, out of the blue. So who knows what happened? It enters this universal world of Hollywood, and people respond to it, and they want to be in business with you, for better or worse. And we say, sure, go for it. And they realize, oh yeah, I have to work at it. And, people I discovered many times want a slam dunk. I mean, it's easy. They think this is a great screenplay. It will be easy sale. And then many times it isn't. And they have to work. We always recommend it. Get some attachments, get some attachments to it. And over the years, we did try to get attachments. Like, for instance, Mara Wilson, if you recall her from like 90s movies when she was a little girl, she was interested in the screenplay. We met with her, and unfortunately, she is not big enough to make it a go project. I had Dakota Fanning when she was little. As a side story, I produced a short film that Dakota Fanning starred. I think it was one of her early movies when she was just 6 years old, and so I was thinking, like, after I made this movie, I'm like, oh, maybe, I talked to her mother, have a good relationship with her, gave her mother Before Billy. She read it. She loved it. She'd be great for Dakota. I mean, the role's like for an 11-year-old girl. So I thought it might be a situation where if you get her interested, by the time the movie's ready to go, she'll be like the right age for it. And of course, what does Dakota's mother do? She does the most sensible thing she can do, which is she gives the screenplay to Dakota's agents. Says, hey, I found this wonderful screenplay, and I think it might be right for Dakota in a couple of years. What do you think? And so what does Dakota's agent do? She calls my agent and says, like, why are you sending screenplay to my clients with no money attached? And by the way, she's booked for the next 2 years. So it's like, And so she became a big movie star very quickly. But over the years, you make effort to try to push these things and try to get going.
Yeah. So take us through now your next couple. I know you've sold some pitches and gotten some writing assignments, so maybe we can talk about some of those, how you were able to land those.
Right. So basically, once you sell something, you get more credibility because somebody actually took a chance on you. They wrote you a check. And so you end up on like a big water bottle tour, and you meet everybody in town, and they want to know what else you're working on. Sometimes they take you out to lunch. Those people who take you out to lunch are the people you remember and like the most because, hey, they took you out to lunch. It's something. I mean, it makes them stand out from just another Evian water bottle. And so you meet a lot of people, and we end up developing a pitch that we went out with, which unfortunately nobody bought. But in the process of that, we ended up pitching to this one executive at a small company, and he couldn't convince his boss to go for it, but he liked the pitch, he liked us, he liked the way we pitch, he liked their story, he liked everything about us. So he said to us, tell me what ideas you have. Let's develop something together in-house and try to get it made. He said, all right. So we met with them, and we had a list of like 20 ideas. They were like log lines. They were like, I think in retrospect, they were like barely log lines. They were like sometimes like fragments of ideas and see what we could make up with this. And by the second one, he said, stop. Have you told this idea to anybody else? No. Okay, don't. We're going to do this movie. Really? Yes. So what I pitched him in my little, 2-3 liner was, it was a teen comedy, and it was, I told him that every teenage boy growing up has 2 ideas pass through his mind. First idea, my parents are so weird, so bizarre, there's no way they could be my biological parents. I must have been adopted. The second idea that every teenage boy thinks through is, you know what? It'd be so cool to grow up in the Playboy Mansion and have Hugh Hefner as a dad. You know, those bunnies around. Oh, my God, that'd be the best. So imagine a movie of these two concepts where a teenage boy, middle America, on the same day discovers that, one, he was adopted, and two, his biological father was a Hugh Hefner type character, and Hugh Hefner has just died, and our hero has inherited the entire Playboy empire. So it's like a kid and the candy store type story where ultimately he gets corrupted, but then learns a lesson about life, friends, and love.
And that movie became Who's Your Daddy, correct?
That is correct. The original title was Money for Nothing, Chicks for Free, which I really like, even though it's rather long. From the Dire Straits song, and unfortunately they could not get the rights to use that title. It became messy, so it became Who's Your Daddy.
Okay. And I was flipping somewhere just recently, and I saw it playing. I can't remember if it was Netflix or even Time Warner Video on Demand. Do you know if it's available to watch for anybody?
I believe it is. I believe it's available on Netflix. Probably on Amazon as well.
Okay.
I think it's. I should qualify by saying that a few words were changed in the rewrites of the screenplay, which we weren't involved. And I think I would say like all of the words were changed. So it's the same story that we wrote with the same characters and going through the same structural story arc. Just different things happen and different things are said. And so since the director rewrote us, we end up sharing writing credit with him because he did change a lot of stuff. However, the core stuff he did not change. So unfortunately, I should say, fortunately, we managed to get credit, some credit for the movie.
Okay. And maybe just talk about that experience. I have talked about my own experience where some of my scripts have been rewritten and how gut-wrenching it can be. And I don't think people coming into the industry really fully understand just how prevalent this is, and it is the norm. Unless you're a guy like Quentin Tarantino that can basically write and direct your own stuff, pretty much as a writer, you're going to be always getting rewritten. And maybe you can talk about just emotionally how that felt, and what did you do to cope with that?
Not a whole lot. You just accept it. You understand it's a work for hire. So when it's a work for hire type agreement, they own everything you wrote, and they can do whatever they want. They could, cut it up and put it in a cat's litter box, if they want to. But then you see like, oh yeah, this moment is a little bit better than our screenplay, but this one isn't, and you wonder like, is it worth changing? And it's just like, it's sort of disappointing. Ultimately, but by the point it comes out, you've moved on to other things, and it almost becomes like a memory from the past. Like, I did something a couple of years ago, and it's like, oh yeah, they made a movie out of it. Okay, cool. How does it look? Yeah, it's not what I wrote. Like, oh well, I hope it does well. My credit is on there, but and you just accept it. I mean, it really is. If you truly emotionally attach yourself to the product. In the screenwriting world, you will be disappointed. Yeah. You will. It's like a guarantee. If you just accept it as being, take a stoic approach to it and think like, oh, I did my best. I hope it advances my career. I hope it makes a movie. I'm on to bigger and better things. I learned things. I became a better writer. I became better dealing with pitching or story development or dealing with executives more diplomatically. I mean, you just become stronger in many ways. So you find the positive in there, and you just focus on that. But truly, by the time it came out, we were on to other things, and it's just like, okay, cool. Okay. We understand. We'll have good experiences. We'll have bad experiences. Mm-hmm.
So then you've done some work for Disney in feature animation. Maybe you can talk about that for just a little bit. How did you segue into that?
It was before Billy. It was like a weird situation where we were interviewing for managers. This is like around, actually 2000. We were interviewing managers because managers started becoming more involved in in the writers' lives at that time. Before that, agents read the screenplays, sent the screenplays out, negotiated a deal, did everything. But starting in the 2000s, there was more managers involved, so their jobs became more split. So we met with a number of managers that our agent at the time introduced us to. And one of them liked Before Billy, and he just took it upon himself to send it to Disney Animation because they were looking for somebody who could write the way we did. I believe the term they used, like an emotionally real way. And Disney Animation executives read it, and they're like, oh, I like it, let's bring him in. So we met with them. We met with, let's see, there were 2 directors, 3 executives, I believe at the head of the story artist, the story department, the guy who managed all the people who draw all the images, and they pitched us the project, which was called Wildlife, and we thought it'd be like a quick gig, like a 2-month gig, doing rewrite work on this project. It ended up turning into 6 months, and they're pitching you this project, and you're looking like, oh, this could be interesting, to be fun, like, wow, a Disney movie. But it was like a very, very different Disney movie than any other kind of Disney movies that were made at the time. It was I would call it a little darker. Mm-hmm. It had a tone. It was like set against a nightclub world, and which is, nightclubs are many times associated with sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and it focused on a singer at the nightclub, and like an elephant, a magical elephant, or an elephant who magically develops the ability to talk and sing, and it becomes about the relationship between the selfish singer and the elephant who's just pure and full of life and love. And okay, this could be fun. This could be interesting. So we hit it off with them. I mean, it's one of the things I discovered, that one of the reasons you get hired is people like you. It's like because they're going to be spending time in rooms with you, and they just want to work with people that are interesting and fun and easy to work with ultimately. But I remember during that interview process, which was ultimately very casual, we just hang out and we chat about stuff. And they asked us, like we read the screenplay, like, and these scenes that are wonderful, like, how do you make, the characters so emotionally real? And we're like, I don't know, we just do it. It's like, how do you answer a question like that? I don't know how I do this stuff. We just do it. Ideas come to mind. We try them out. We rewrite it. We make it better. And suddenly it becomes bigger than the sum of the parts. Mm-hmm. So we end up 6 months on that project, which was great. I mean, it's a whole different world of animation, and we can write it. And it's like you don't work in sequence, and you work scenes, like they want to work on this part here, work on that part here. Let's reinvent this. This isn't working. And truly, I mean, if you've heard things about feature animation, it's things like they try every single approach possible to tell the story. So that is why they take, many years, sometimes, 3 to 5 years to get a movie made. But this movie was actually in production. I mean, they spent millions on it already, and they just needed to make it better. And they had models, and they filmed storyboards. They call it putting on reels, where they film, the voiceover of the actors. They put sound effects, temp music, and you put on reel and you go to the theater and you watch it and you watch these slides, and sometimes they're just black and white sketches. Sometimes they're very colorful and elaborate. I mean, there's no real true animation, but it certainly gives you a sense of the flow of the narrative, which was like a really fascinating experience to go through that. Yeah. Unfortunately, ultimately, the powers that be saw the movie and thought, yeah, I'm not sure we want to make this movie after all. It's like, really? You just spent millions of dollars. Have you thought about making this decision earlier? It's like, no, because this thing keeps evolving and changing. It starts as one thing, and by the time the powers that be see it, becomes a different thing. So they're not sure they want to spend more money on it, and it just became something that ultimately they did not want to make. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately.
Yeah. So let's jump ahead. I think we probably met about 7 years ago, and I talk about my writers group on the podcast quite often, and that's how you and I met.
Yes. And
I was doing the email and fax blast, and you started to use that service a little bit, and maybe we can talk through that a little bit. I think probably over the years and you could quote me on this, I never kept careful track, but I would say you've probably done a dozen blasts with me. I
would say very easily a dozen blasts with, I think, perhaps 3 or 4 different screenplays.
Yeah.
With varying results. Everything, with results that led to options, or results that led to meetings, or ultimately results that led up to the Hallmark movie, which brought me on this
Maybe you can
call.
talk about some of those options. I get questions, people asking me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but my recollection is at least one of the options you told me about was a Canadian company, and it was a fairly big project. It was not just like a micro budget type of a movie. And people are always asking, can you option movies that have bigger budgets? And I thought that you had. Maybe you can talk about some of these options, sort of the scope of those scripts.
Right. I mean, I my cinematic sensibility is I like to write big movies, not as big as tentpole movies, those kind of comic book type stuff, but certainly studio type films with A-list actors that would cost anywhere between $20 to $60 million to make. I mean, that's ultimately, even though the below the line costs would be substantially less. So, like, one of the movies was an action comedy about an organ courier and his misadventures in trying to deliver a donor heart to the biggest canine movie star in the world. Unfortunately, he loses the cooler holding that heart and spends the entire movie trying to retrieve it, get in time to the hospital to save this poor dog before he starts barking the pearly gates. Mm-hmm. And so one of the producers like, yeah, I like this. We can make it. I want to make it. And they option it, and they try. Mm-hmm. They try to raise the money, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So I think maybe had like one, I would call it in the low budget, which could be done for a couple $1 million, with not major movie stars, but perhaps TV actors who want to do a feature sort of thing. Yeah. But most of them are on the higher budget, and there are people who want to do that, and as a result of the Blast, I got to meet some of them.
Yeah, perfect. So let's talk specifically about this Hallmark movie that you were just hired to write and kind of take us through that story. I think it's really important for people to hear your story because, again, I get a lot of people that say, well, how many scripts have been sold through the email and fax blast? And a lot of times it's not just about the sale. It's about cultivating these relationships. And sometimes cultivating the relationships can take many, many years. And I think this is a prime example of that. So maybe you can talk us through that whole process.
This is so prime. Basically, I was thinking, like, when do we do this blast on this specific producer? And it was exactly 4 years ago, or late January or early February. And I sent the screenplay, and a couple of months later, he calls me and says, hey, I like the screenplay, let's meet and talk. So I met and talked with him, and we hit it off. Sometimes you just have good chemistry with people, and you like them, and you think they're decent, and he had a lot of credits to his name, mostly like action type movies, because as it turned out, his company has a studio complex in Bulgaria, right outside the capital of Sofia, and so he was looking to do more movies for television, and the main sources for those main places that make those kind of movies he was targeting were Lifetime and Hallmark. So his basic question for me, do you have any Hallmark movies? Do you have Lifetime movies? And we started discussing ideas, and I would write them up for him, and he liked them, and then he pitch them to Hallmark or Lifetime, and sometimes they they sort of like this idea. Can you expand on this 2 or 3 sentences that you originally gave me? So I expanded to a couple pages, and this went over for a number of years. And you reach a point where whatever, will it go somewhere? Who knows? But you give it a try. So in mid last June, I recently went through the timeline of how things occurred. Mid-June, he calls me and says, hey, I pitched one of my own ideas to Hallmark because I met a new executive there, and he liked it. Can you write me up a couple pages? Now, I haven't talked to this producer. His name is Jeff. I haven't talked to Jeff for a year. Ultimately, I just sort of gave up. I can't really pursue it. He has to pursue it. But if nothing's happening, what's the point? So I said, sure. So I wrote up a couple pages, got it done in a couple weeks. which is just a general outline. It just talks about the characters, their dramatic emotional challenges, the plot twist, what happens in the second act, and how it gets resolved. So if you read the 2 pages, you get a full feeling of not only the tone, but the narrative flow of the story. And he liked it, and he passed it on to Hallmark. And then, of course, I move on with my life, and I don't expect to hear back like before. But then, early August, he gives me a call and says, you know what, Hallmark, I think they're going to go for this movie. It's like, really? Yeah, I think they're going to make it. All right. You know what? But they're making a lot of movies. They're making like 70, 80 movies a year. So they're a bit busy. Jeff expressed a concern that unless we start moving on this right away, it will not get done in time for Valentine's Day. It was very specifically a Valentine's Day movie. So what Jeff decided to do is hire me directly. So in August, I had my agent negotiate a deal with Jeff, and by August 20th, I started writing a screenplay. And started writing it August 20th, and he asked me, this is a funny question too. He calls me like, so how quickly can you write the screenplay? I said, well, typical time is like 10 to 12 weeks. And he says, can you do it in 6? It's like, no. How about 8? It's like, all right, let's shoot for 8. So I start August 20th, and interestingly enough, I do finish the first draft by October 20th. When I mean a first draft, a draft that I'm okay with submitting to him. Because ultimately he wants it, and obviously I cannot just spend all the time in the world trying to make it perfect, considering the fact I'll get feedback on it, and if I make it perfect, they'll change stuff, and I would have wasted a lot of time. So it took about 4 weeks to get the first words on paper, and then another 4 weeks to massage it into something that I'm not embarrassed about. Mm-hmm. Of course, first time I read it I was visiting family in North Carolina, and the first time I read it was on my computer flying back. A long flight from North Carolina you can get a lot done. So I actually read it for the first time as a whole screenplay. And it's like, okay, this works, and there's some good stuff in here. And it was a really good experience. I mean, I've never written a screenplay that quickly. On some levels, this is another subject of discussion, perhaps we can touch upon. We entered the spiritual realm, the God, universe, muse realm of things, where there are these moments where ideas were coming to me, and it's like at such a pace that I have no idea where they were coming from. I mean, to the level of I'm writing a simple line of description, and it's as if I'm hearing a voice telling me like, oh, don't write that line, write this line instead. It's like, all right, I'll write this line instead. Like, oh yeah, that is a good line, thank you. And these moments, like these scenes, like pieces of dialogue, like, oh my God, I mean, they just came together sort of like perfectly with like very tiny changes to make the scene work even better. It was like really, really freaky. So, I settled they're my muses. So my muses hang around me, and I thank them for their efforts. And of course, I like the idea of these, chicks with togas hanging around and giving me guidance how to write the screenplay. Yeah. So, but truly, it was like this. I also heard about the kind of stuff happening to writers where they just become channels for forces from beyond to feed you stuff, and like I truly experienced it for the first time in this script on such a level.
Yeah. Let me just go back on a couple of things. So you're
Yes.
talking about these treatments. You're pitching them ideas. You're turning some of these into 2- and 3-page treatments. How many of those do you think you wrote over the course of those couple of years?
Not too many. I would say 4 or 5. But I did pitch him a lot of ideas. I would say between Lifetime and Hallmark, maybe 2 to 3 dozen ideas.
Okay. And was he paying you to turn these into 2- or 3-page outlines, or you were just doing that on your own, hoping to get the job if it turned into something?
It's that. You do it on your own. It's sort of your audition. You're part of the process. And, ultimately he has money. He could have hired me, but it's just not the way the system really works, because you want to make sure that, he gets money back.
Yeah. And one of the things that I've definitely run into over the years is I've gotten a lot of producers saying, hey, I've got this idea. Can you write up a 2-page treatment? And how do you distinguish, the real producers, people who you want to work with versus people, I don't think this guy's ever actually going to make a movie. Because there's plenty of people out there that would love to have writers write up their ideas. I get producers emailing me through Selling Your Screenplay. Hey, I need someone to write up this idea into a script or into a treatment. I don't have any money to do it. And how do you sort of vet those people? And why did you decide to give this guy the benefit of the doubt and write 5 treatments for him over the course of this time?
Several reasons. I liked him. I trusted him. He has significant credits, and significant in the sense like not like $100 million Hollywood blockbusters, but movies that were made over the years on a consistent basis. And on top of that, he had a studio complex. It's not like he, had trouble making movies. So he felt very real. And ultimately just go for your gut feelings. Do you trust this person? Because I've dealt with other people where that, like, for instance, the options on Through the Blast, where they wanted changes to the screenplay. And it's like, I listen to their approach of what they want change, and they're talking about it completely right. And I'm like, okay, do I want to do this? And it's like, the answer is like, no. It's like, I don't like your ideas. You're not paying me any money. You have no credits to your name. The connections you do have, that you're trying to impress me with, you're not succeeding. So try to do something with the screenplay the way it is. And if you happen to get interest in it, then we'll talk about rewriting it. But and I had a few situations like that. But ultimately, just make a decisions. You connect to yourself. We're all writers. We're artists. We're supposed to be more intuitive than the average bear. And then you listen to your voice inside that says, go with this or not. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, it's also something I learned over the years, which is something a little more challenging to actually execute, and that is work with people who have the same cinematic sensibility as you do, which comes to play when you first meet with them. You can talk about movies, like what movies do you like? What movies have you seen in theater recently? What are your favorite movies? And the more interesting ones are the ones that avoid the cliche answers of famous classic movies, everything from Raiders to Citizen Kane, just like, okay, some quirky movies that few people have heard of, like, wow, you like that movie? I like that movie too. Wow, that's amazing. Okay, you realize like you have a certain similar taste. When you have a similar taste, it becomes easier to work with them. Yeah. I learned this the hard way because I did get hired on this other project a few years ago where I discovered the producers haven't seen very many movies, and part of my dealing with them was to educate them on movies and how movies work. But it became really difficult because it got to the point where they're talking about movies they saw, and they're hating the ones I love. And it's like, really? How can you hate this movie? It's brilliant. And they love movies that I thought, whatever. So I think it's very important to try to have that sensibility, which ultimately, for future reference, even for myself or anybody else, if you go on one of those water bottle tours, have those conversations with those executives, and it will help you, realize like, yeah, this person's smart. They know movies. They love movies. They love the same movies that I do. I think they might be good to work with on things in the future. Mm-hmm. As compared to like, I don't think you know anything about movies. I don't know how you got this job in the movie industry. It's just. I mean, there's some bright, talented people, and there's people who I would put in the clueless category. Fortunately, there's very few of those I encounter. I have to admit, overall, I've been very lucky.
Yeah. So what's the name of this movie? It's called Valentine's Again? Yeah,
so what ended up happening is I turned it in October 20th, and he passed it on to Hallmark. And then on November 5th, Saturday, I get an email from him. And the email says, looks like we have a deal. We shoot in 3 weeks. And by the way, here are 10 pages of notes from Hallmark on what they want to change with the screenplay. And so I look at the notes, and actually they're pretty good. I mean, it's many of the things I would have done myself if I had more time. Mm-hmm. Things like, sometimes they're very specific Hallmark type stuff because they have a very, very specific brand and make a very specific type of movies for a very specific type of audience. So, for instance, they sort of have a rule that we cannot harm any animals in our movies, or even appear that animal might get hurt during the filming of the movie. So there was a scene early on in the script where a little dog, gets loose on a leash, and our heroine jumps in the street and saves this dog, which is, of course, a little challenging to film that to begin with. So I changed it to the dog is running down the street loose. Our heroine sees it, and she grabs the dog off the sidewalk right before it leaps off the curb into traffic. And they said, no, this still won't work because the dog is potentially in danger. We cannot have that. It's like, all right. So the end resolution was the dog runs up to her. She hears it bark and just like looking up at her, which was a little weird. I mean, a little dramatically weak because I was trying to do like a save the cat type moment or save the dog type moment. But ultimately, when you see the entire movie, this little moment has meaning to it because the dog's owner has a big role in the story. And so it becomes influencing our heroine on a certain path in her life. So it's almost as if this dog picked her to be picked for this adventure our heroine goes on.
Perfect. And when is the movie going to be airing?
It's going to be airing unofficially. It's going to be airing. It's February 12th at 9 p.m. on the Hallmark channel. Okay. Now, that is not official yet because the film is not finished yet. So I did all the rewrites, and they started filming it right after Thanksgiving. And they filmed it till Christmas, and they've been doing posts since then. So actually, I spoke to the producer on Monday, and they were doing some ADR in London, and they needed some dialogue for a phone call conversation because I wrote what we see on the screen, but I didn't write the dialogue for what happens, to who she's talking to. So I had to write some dialogue and send it to them so they can have the actor record the stuff. So they're still finishing up. My understanding is it's supposed to be done by the end of the month. And once it's done, then Hallmark sees, okay, we have a finished movie. We can actually put it officially on the schedule. So at the moment, it's not on the official schedule, but I saw a press release that listed those specific dates, date and time.
Okay, perfect. And do those types of movies, do they end up on places like Netflix and Hulu after they've had a run on Hallmark?
That's an excellent question. I would hope so, but I don't. I cannot say. I really don't know.
Okay, perfect. And I'd just like to wrap up the interviews by asking the guests to tell us where people can find you and follow along with what you're doing. Anything you're comfortable sharing, a Facebook page, a Twitter account, blog, anything like that, we can put in the show notes.
You can follow me through my website, which is jacksekowski.com. I haven't done a blog on there yet. It is on my list of things to do, but anytime there's anything big going to happen, I'm going to list it on there. Of course, I also use Facebook, so if you want to friend me on Facebook, I'm very open to that. But please send a message saying you heard about you listen to the podcast, because if we have no friends in common, I will not likely friend you back. So if you could, just quick notes saying, hey, I listened to you and Ashley's podcast, friend me back sort of thing. Like, great, no problem. Oh, I do want to tell you a Hollywood story.
Sure.
Sort of like one of those, since we're reaching the end of our interview, one of my favorite Hollywood stories. That dealt with Before Billy. So when Marie and I first came to California, we did what everybody does, which is take the Universal tour and take the tram ride on the back lot. And as we were on the tram ride, I was looking at these bungalows and watching those people, walk in and out of those bungalows. I'm wondering, who the hell are those people and how did they get those jobs and how can I be one of them, which is of course most important. Mm-hmm. And then, exactly 10 years later, we saw the screenplay to Universal, and Larry's office was in one of those very bungalows. So we have those meetings there. And one day, we're leaving the meeting, heading for the parking lot, sliding on our cool sunglasses in the very bright California sun. And as we're about to cross the street, a tram stops right in front of us. And everybody on the tram is just looking at us, wondering are there anybody famous sort of thing? And they're just like, wow. So they're like, oh my God, 10 years ago, we were those people on the tram. And 10 years later, we are gazing back at them.
Comes full circle.
Yep.
So, well, Jack, I really appreciate you coming on and talking with me. Congratulations on the Hallmark movie. And I look forward to watching it.
Thank you, Ashley. It was a pleasure to be on, and good luck to you. And I hope to be on again sometime in the future as more things develop.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Perfect. See you later, Jack. A quick plug for the SYS Screenwriting Analysis Service. It's a really economical way to get a high-quality professional evaluation on your screenplay. When you buy our 3-pack, you get evaluations at just $67 per script for feature films and just $55 for teleplays. All the readers have professional experience reading for studios, production companies, contests, and agencies. You can read a short bio on each reader on our website. You can pick the one who you think is the best fit for your script. Turnaround time is usually just a few days, but rarely more than a week. The readers will evaluate your script on 6 key factors: concept, characters, structure, marketability, tone, and overall craft, which includes formatting, spelling, and grammar. Every script will get a grade of pass, consider, or recommend, which should help you roughly understand where your script might rank if you were to submit it to a production company or agency. We can provide an analysis on feature or television scripts. We also do proofreading without any analysis. We will also look at a treatment or outline and give you the same analysis on it. So if you're looking to vet some of your project ideas, this is a great way to do it. We will also write a logline and synopsis for you. So if you have a completed script, you can send that in. Our readers will read it. They will write a logline. They will write a synopsis. You can also get an analysis, so you can add the logline and synopsis service as an add-on to an analysis, or you can just get it purely as a standalone product where all we do is read the script, write the logline, write the synopsis. As a bonus, if your script gets a recommend from a reader, you get a free email and fax blast to my list of industry contacts. This is the exact same blast service I use myself to promote my own scripts, and it's the same service I sell on the website. It's a great way to get your script into the hands of producers who are looking for material. So if you want a professional evaluation of your screenplay at a very reasonable price, check out www.sellingyourscreenplay.com/consultants. On the next episode of the podcast, I'm going to be interviewing writer, director, and producer Erin Dooley. She just did a documentary which she shot and edited herself, and she's done a ton of short films over the years too, so we talk through all of that as well. So keep an eye out for that episode next week. To wrap things up, I just want to touch on a few things from today's interview with Jack. I've talked about this quite a bit on the podcast. The people who have the most success with my email and fax blast service are people like Jack who come to it with a good bit of screenwriting experience. Now, this is not to say that you shouldn't use my service or any number of the other similar services out there, Inktip, The Blacklist, screenwriting contests. If you don't have any experience, using these services is one way that you can start to gain some of that experience. So it's a part of the process, but I do think it's worth noting. Jack didn't have any experience when he started sending out that original batch of query letters to agents way back at the beginning of his career. So everybody needs to start somewhere, and everybody needs to start to get that experience. But I think it's worth noting that all of these services, and again, including my own service, they work better the more experience you have. And I think, it's probably, common sense. I mean, the more experience you have, presumably the better your script is, the stronger your script, the stronger your material. Obviously, the stronger your script is, the better your material is. All of these services will work better if you have a better script. So to me, that sort of leads us down this path. And the real question becomes, how can I gain that experience? And one of the answers is to write and produce short films, even low budget feature films. And I talk about that a lot on the podcast. The next couple of weeks on the podcast, I'm going to have some people like Erin, who's next week, who really has done a lot with her short films. And we really talk through some of the beginning stages of her short films. And, it was like $100. Her very first short film was just something her and her sister went out and did. And that's sort of the first steps. But those steps lead to gaining valuable experience. I feel like a lot of new writers, they come into this and they just want to get that that big spec studio sale. And that's fantastic. I hope that works out for you. But to make that work, there's going to be an element of luck. It's going to be a big part of that equation is just going to be luck. I mean, obviously you're going to have to write a great script and you're going to have to meet the right people. But there's going to be a lot of things that have to go right for you to just out of nowhere write that spec script. It's happened. There have definitely been writers that's happened to, but I don't think that that's necessarily the norm. And again, I talk about this on the podcast. I wrote an article where I took the first 75 podcast episodes and charted how all of these screenwriters had got their first break and sold their first script. And very, very rare. I don't even remember out of those 75 how many people just out of nowhere sold a spec script and then launched their career. I don't know. Thinking back on it, I don't know as anybody. Networking was the number one thing. Doing short films, doing low budget feature films. Those were the kinds of things that work. And again, we focus on these big sort of out of nowhere stories. This person just, wrote a script and sent it to this producer and he was off to the races and made a big sale. And, we celebrate those things because those are interesting stories and those are great stories. But I don't know that there's a lot that I don't know there's a lot you can learn from those stories as far as taking away and building on your own career. I think if we concentrate more on the small incremental steps to building a career, I think you will start to remove that element of luck that you need and you will start to move your career ahead. And again, really think about how you can gain experience, even modest experience doing short films in your own apartment or in your own house with your friends as actors, editing on your computer. That stuff will start to really help you as a writer and you'll start to get it out there. You'll send it to some festivals. You'll put it on YouTube. You'll start to meet people. That's all part of the process. And I would say don't underestimate it. Obviously, Jack has had great success with the email and fax blast service, and just really listen to, though, what his experience was. Jack, one of the things that's impressed me about Jack is a really good writer, too. He, as I mentioned, he was in my writers group and always brought scripts in there very well, a lot of family-friendly comedies and good concepts, a good writer. So he has that going for him. But the other thing that always impressed me about Jack was he was very aggressive on the marketing, and he obviously has used my email and fax blast probably more than any other person than myself. I don't remember if anybody has done that many blasts. I don't think so. I think Jack is probably second, but to myself, obviously I've done more than a dozen for myself. But Jack, as I said, he's always been aggressive on the marketing, and it's not just my email and fax blast service. He's always out there trying to market stuff. And listen to what he was doing at the early part of his career. He was sending out query letters. He was following up. He was making lists. He was always trying to find angles to market his script, and those little things added up. I think that's really important to realize. He didn't just come to me, do one blast, and then he got this Hallmark movie. It's a long process, and gaining that experience takes just a long time. There's no way of just, getting that experience. You can't get it quickly. You've got to earn that stuff. I've had a few other people on the podcast over the years who have had success with my email and fax blast service. Just want to point those out because, again, I think it's worth really listening to those people's stories and understanding what they did. In episode number 57, I had Jordan Imiola on. He has optioned a couple of scripts and gotten some paid writing assignments through my email and fax blast service. Go back and listen to that episode. Jordan is a prime example. He had a lot of experience coming to the email and fax blast service, but a lot of it was self-made experience. He's done a lot of short films. He went and wrote and produced a half-hour comedy pilot. He just does a lot of stuff, and that's his body of work, and that's his experience. And again, all that stuff helps meet people, get feedback, and it makes you a better writer. On episode number 79, I had Jan Arado on, and that whole episode, she used the email and fax blast service and actually got an option deal, and we talked through that option deal on that. But we talk a little bit about the script. She was not someone that had a great deal of screenwriting experience prior to the email and fax blast service. So again, I think it's worth looking at that episode as well. But there's some important takeaways from what her script was, and it was a kind of a low budget, sort of a thriller type of a script. And those are the types of scripts that work well with these types of services like my email fax blast service, certainly like an Inktip, where the budget is not so extraordinary. It's not going to take a studio, $100 million studio, financing to get that movie made. So again, it's worth listening to that episode, especially if you don't have a ton of experience, and you can kind of hear what her story is and learn hopefully from that. Episode number 103 had Dan Benamor on, and he had just sold a spec script. Again, just flat out sold it. The producer just bought it from him. And again, that was through the email and Fax Blast service. But Dan is another person. He worked in development. He got a job, and I think we talk about this on the podcast, but he just got a job, like a low-level job at a production company. I think he was just like an unpaid intern. Maybe he was paid. I honestly don't remember. But the bottom line is he got him his foot in the door as sort of a low-level intern, and he worked his way up. He worked there for a few years and did a good job, read a lot of scripts, did a lot of coverage, helped in the development of a lot of projects that this production company was doing, and slowly moved up the ranks. And by the time he left that company, he was actually helping to develop and even write some of the scripts that this company was doing. Now he has since left that job and is a full-time writer, and again, used my email and Fax Blast service after all of this years in development. And again, those are the kinds of things that can really, really make you a better writer. You understand the business side of things. Again, I understand everyone is not in a position to just get a low-level job at a production company and work their way up. I certainly understand that, but all of these people, and I think those are good examples. The episode 103 with Dan, episode number 79 with Jen, and episode 57 with Jordan. I think those are good examples of different people taking different approaches, and even Jack, what we just talked about, different people taking different approaches to gain some experience. And there was no like flash in the pan. There was no huge breakthrough moment for these people. It's just slow incremental steps, getting projects done, doing shorts, doing low budget features, working in development, optioning scripts. All of these things are they're not as sexy as that big, $500,000 spec sale to Universal. Those are like sexy and they're big and everyone wants to talk about those things, but those are not the norm. I think these smaller incremental steps, I think, is what most of us should be concentrating on. And that's what I try and concentrate on with my own career, is as I try and progress myself, I go and I try and just each time try and do a little better, a little bigger project, and slowly go up the ranks. And hopefully you can learn something from these episodes. I will gather up all these episodes, put them in the show notes so you can click over to them. But again, if you haven't listened to any of those episodes, you might consider checking them out and really listening to what their stories are. Anyway, that's the show. Thank you for listening.